This last year has seen a number of important developments in the way that health and well-being services are to be designed and delivered in the future, and thus have an impact on the way that our communities are to receive the services that they want and need. After all, we know that many of our communities do not have the option or the opportunity to buy themselves out of public services, so the better and the smarter our public services are in meeting need, the greater the improvement in the quality of life of our communities. Last year's Closing the Gap event with Ian Reynolds, the former chair of NHS Wandsworth, allowed us to explore issues with them and our communities on matters beyond mental health and into primary healthcare services. Other highlights of the last year have included our second annual Black Mental Health Conference with the New Testament Assembly and our Improving Access to Psychological Therapies seminar, which we co-produced with our Mental Health Trust partners and which was held at the King's Fund in central London. The Trust also relaunched their application to become a foundation trust, and we continued to explore with them other ways in which they can increase access into and involvement of communities in seeking to improve mental health and well-being outcomes.
I think the Trust can help. I do think the Trust can help other organisations, but I'm hoping other organisations can help us. I learned things sitting there about some of the other organisations around the table that I was less familiar with. So I think it's a real opportunity to cross-fertilise, to also look at things we can do together, where we might be able to make some different arrangements, some perhaps less conventional partnerships that may still be able to deliver.
What added impetus and new energy to much of this work was the newly elected government's introduction in July of last year of the Health White Paper, Equity and Excellence, Liberating the NHS. This heralded the biggest shake-up of the NHS in a generation. Andrew Lansley, the Secretary of State for Health, declared that no future services will be designed for us without us.
We will extend personal budgets, giving patients with long-term conditions real choices about their care.
This and other reforms introduced as part of a big society project has sought to reduce the power and influence of what government has called bloated public agencies and put much more control over how these services are being designed and delivered into the hands of patients, service users and the public at large. As part of these health reforms, primary care trusts are being abolished, and the power and responsibility to commission health and well-being services are to be transferred to newly formed GP-led clinical commissioning groups, of which there will be 3 in Wandsworth. Health and well-being partnership boards have also been established, and these have been charged with designing and developing overarching plans, including joint strategic needs assessment, which will be used to help inform and influence the way that our GPs will commission health services in the future. Taking our cue from these developments, we invited Councillor James Madden, the Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care in Wandsworth Council, as well as the Chairman of our Health and Wellbeing Partnership Board, to take a journey with us across our communities, to meet some of our leaders and representatives, and to listen and to share with them some of the issues and concerns that they have about everyday life in our borough. This would also be an opportunity to hear about some of the community-led solutions that are being thought about and developed to improve health and well-being services and outcomes, as well as some of the ways in which the Mental Health Trust has been partnering the development of these new ways of working. Linwood Christian Fellowship hosted a coming together of leaders, representatives and friends of our local African Caribbean communities. What emerged in our discussions was the range and depth of expert knowledge and experiences within our communities, which remains largely unknown and untapped as a resource for public agencies. Amongst the other matters we discussed was the continuing overrepresentation of BME communities in mental health services and how much a deeper exploration and understanding of these issues may allow us to start unravelling some of the underlying factors that have led to this.
When I go to the doctor, as soon as I get through the door, prescription is ready. I have been given tablets. I'm just giving these tablets instead of being looked at. So there's no point in going. And so they just carry on. And things get worse, don't they?
The Association of Somali Women and Children hosted a meeting on the Doddington and Rollo estate in North Battersea, which includes some of the most disadvantaged wards in the borough. We're also joined by the Mission Accomplished Soccer School, or MASS for short, which is a football club who work with many of our young people who live and play in these areas. Again, a striking part of these discussions was the range and depth of community knowledge and understanding of often complex social issues, and a deep desire that many of these communities have in wanting to participate much more in public life and to make a difference for the benefit of their communities, and yet find it difficult to access meaningful opportunities through which they may be able to do so.
Say I'm a single mother. Then they will help the wards. Did you understand? So all this fathers, basically it's not their fault. It's the system's fault. So I'm not blaming any Somalian man. That's his fault. I'm blaming for the government and for the system. And all these women, the man also take advantage of the Somali women. They are covering the man work, his basically responsibility, and they're doing all that hard work.
We also visited the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies team base, again IAPT for short, at Springfield Hospital, to hear firsthand from the provider side of their experience of working with communities, delivering services in community sites, and how this is having an impact on the way that service overall is learning and sharing new ways of working. The learning from this work is beginning to act as a template in how we can continue to introduce more and more public services into community sites, with our community leaders taking a much more active role and responsibility in raising awareness on available services, as well as reaching out to and accessing the communities who have thus far been beyond the reach of existing services.
One of the really great things about this whole process has been just from the perspective of being a member of the church and being involved with the community, with people's lives. I understand about working with families who have a loved one who has ended up in a mental institution, then in a prison, and then died. And so a lot of the negatives, a lot of the shouting at that you spoke about, I understand where that comes from. And so being able for our church organisation and to be personally involved in a process that can actually bring about some of those changes, understand some things and then address some of that, I think that's been particularly helpful.
Mushkil Hassan, a leading local expert organisation in how to deliver culturally competent public services, hosted a meeting of some of our South Asian community leaders, and much of our conversation again centred on the gaps between the way that public agencies design their services and how, by them not having a fully informed cultural community understanding built into service delivery, they inadvertently act in a way that has excluded communities from receiving them. Much of our conversation also centred on the health and social care of older members of our community and the importance of sensitive and appropriate end-of-life care.
And it's not just one place for 4 hours, it's so many places. And it's perfect. Everybody knows that 24 hours is the maximum that the Muslim can keep the body. Only very, very circumstances is okay. But otherwise we need to bury them in the hospital. 3 o'clock she passes away, and then only Sunday at 1 o'clock she's buried.
On a busy Friday afternoon, we visited the Tooting Islamic Centre at a meeting hosted by the Imam of the mosque. We were also joined by the chairman and executive members of their management committee, who shared with us their frustrations at not having a genuine relationship with our public agencies in ways that they could use to support their own communities. We explored the possibilities of these buildings being opened up so that they not only continue to provide religious services, but also are partnering the delivery of public services as well. So these communities no longer become hard to reach, but become within reach, receiving services at places which some of their members will find much more comfortable and accessible to their needs.
But certainly, I mean, we can share that with the authorities, and I'm sure that if there is areas where it could support and assist with any Muslim patients who may be hospitalized or who may be not coming to our center, and they could be referred to the imams, vice versa, we could also share that with the with the trust, and at the same time explore avenues of communicating with the wider community and saying to them that, look, at any time we've set this up and you can come in and have a look.
A meeting of Anglican and historic churches communities was hosted by St Mary's Church in Balham and included representatives from some of our local churches in that area of the borough. We learnt through these discussions that it was not only those commonly held to be hard to reach, but whole sections of our wider community also struggle with making headway in accessing the services they want and need, which would help to improve the health and well-being of the people they seek to serve and support, including many of our local homeless people and those who are hidden away from public sight.
When I had an accident 3 years ago, I broke both my wrists and I had to have a carer every morning to get me up and wash me and dress me for about 3 weeks. I think every single one of the carers I had told me they were going on to see somebody who was living on their own, and the only person they would see in the course of that day would be the carer for a very short period of time. They had no family, they were too old, maybe their friends had died or moved away or wherever. And those people are more invisible, I think, than anybody else.
What these visits and conversations revealed was how very hard some of our public agencies are working in seeking to provide services that are genuinely accessible and accountable to all of our communities. However, these conversations also revealed that many of our communities remain disengaged and disillusioned with the way that public services are not providing for them and their members. Yet what has remained encouraging and consistent throughout this journey is the enthusiasm and the commitment of our leaders and members to want to play an active part in the public and the civic life of our borough. This is the challenge then, and also the opportunity. For our public agencies, their leaders and managers alongside our community, voluntary sector and faith leaders, to take up the mantle and to seize the opportunities that these public sector reforms are presenting. Now is the time for us to deliver on this promise.